because I've been a mainstream teacher, I know that one of the dilemmas for other mainstream teachers is when they have a student or a small group of students in the class that have what we label as special needs. And for a lot of them, I guess it intimidates them to a certain extent because they don't feel that they have specialist knowledge to deal with this. And in fact, it doesn't actually take specialist knowledge. Once again, it just is about taking the time to get to know the student and find some interest, some spark that they can then use in a cross-curricular way. So it's not about teaching reading or writing or maths or science. If you can find that person's interest, you can then relate, instead of trying to fit the student into a set curriculum guidelines on how to teach a subject, you can take their interest and then find the connections between that interest and the things that you want them to learn in the different subjects. Hi, my name is Alanna. I'm a secondary school teacher. My major teaching subject was English. During my career, I went from teaching mainstream English students to working with students with special needs, a whole variety of students through every year level at secondary school, and also a wide range of abilities. Just because people had special needs, it didn't necessarily mean that they were not talented academically. And so it was a very rewarding role watching these students achieve their potential. Every teacher will agree that the fundamental thing before children start learning, you can teach away, but the fundamental thing is to have them engaged. And that can sometimes be the most difficult thing. If a student's not engaged, it doesn't just affect their learning, but it affects the learning of the students around them. And it's every teacher's dilemma to find what engages those students that you just feel that you're making no progress with, and they are having an impact on the learning of the students around them. Experience has shown me that if you can find what it is that a student is interested in, no matter how off the wall that is, you can then use that to introduce them to other areas of the curriculum as a trigger, really, to get them learning the key competencies and other subject areas. There was one student in particular that came across our path, and he hadn't had a lot of success academically at school. He was really just counting down the years till he left. He couldn't actually see a lot of purpose in what he was doing. And while he was a reasonably cooperative student, he sort of demonstrated all the things that tend to happen with a student that's sitting in a classroom that is just not interested or engaged in what's being taught. And so he was either just not really there, he was off in his own little world, or he was trying to attract attention to help the lesson go quicker for him, so doing all sorts of distracting behaviours. It got to the important NCA time of his schooling where we had to come up with a program of study for him, and trying to find something that would be not too challenging, given that he didn't have a good academic background at that stage. We chose art as a subject and food technology, and discovered that he had an absolute passion for art. And it was an amazing turnaround, because the student that it had been extremely difficult to keep focused for a whole lesson actually became a role model for the rest of the class, because as he achieved success in the subject, it was like
was success feeding success?
Yeah, it was like it was like a snowball effect, basically. The more that he achieved, the more he wanted to do, And it wasn't just in the classroom, you know, the parents' feedback was that he was coming home and working away on what he'd been doing at school. And that achievement actually, before he even left school, had started having an impact outside of school and outside of home, in that he became a finalist in art competitions and has now gone on to have a career as an artist, which is unusual in itself for anybody at his stage of life. He's still just a young adult, and he now has not just national success but international success, and is loving his life. But so, for example, I talked recently to some parents, and they were quite frustrated with how their son's going at school and worried for the future. He's at high school now. He's in year 9, I believe. And I just said to them, so what's his thing? And they said, what do you mean? I said, what has your son got a thing? Is there something that really excites him, that he loves? And they looked at me and they said, birds. And they told me how, and they've discovered this recently, they had no idea, but he went to hospital, and while he was there, he noticed the pigeons outside on the windowsill. And so the windows hardly open at all for safety reasons, but he managed to feed these birds and coach them close enough that he caught them, and he was keeping them in his bedside locker and feeding them. And that went on for a couple of days. And people could not believe how he did this. But they've discovered that birds are actually attracted to him, and he has found little baby birds that have been, you know, fallen out of their nest and that, and been secretly feeding them and looking after them. The other thing that they discovered was as a treat, they took him to Kelly Tarleton's, which is, it's got all sorts of birds and fish and different things. And when they got up there were some penguins, and they were astonished to find that he knew anything and everything in great detail, and on a very sophisticated level, about penguins. Every single thing you could possibly think of about penguins he knew. Now, a teacher could really use that. Like, it doesn't have to be birds and it doesn't have to be art, but if you can find out what is of interest to a student, if you think of penguins, you can think of the science of it, like the migratory habits of penguins, or not necessarily penguins, but he's got this fascination with birds. You can extend that, and you can extend that into science and into English, obviously, with stories, and into technology and inquiry-based learning. And often what happens, like the rest of us, is one interest will lead to another anyway, and what starts off as something small will grow. But you can use these things to, as I say, without the student even knowing it, to branch out into other areas of the curriculum and use that passion and that interest to teach these other skills. It also impacts on the key competencies, because when a student is being acknowledged for their success, they feel more confident to contribute. Everybody likes to feel that they know a little bit more than someone else, or that they are recognised as having a skill in some area. And so this encourages the participation and contribution. You know, when people are told that something they've done is good, they get a sense of pride and self-esteem and self-worth from people being interested and wanting them to share it with them.
And all these things are, of course, the basis of career development for a future.
Absolutely. And so in the case of this boy with the birds, I was able to tell the parents that quite local to them was a bird sanctuary where they specialise in releasing birds that have been separated from their parents or whatever back into the wild. And so when I told the boy that this was there and that they are looking for volunteers, he was really, really excited. And I mean, who knows, this could lead to becoming a veterinarian, or even just being involved in DOC or something like that. So everybody has potential, and it's just, school isn't always a good environment for students to discover and to you know, we talk about inquiry-based learning, but we still want to constrict it to the subjects we want kids to learn about, and that, instead of, you know, finding what it is that they want to learn about and then using that to teach the skills that we want to teach.